We're back and ready to finish building out our building blocks of disciple making. We've already talked in the previous video about the lessons that we learned from the ministry of Jesus, and those laid the first three core foundational blocks for our template. But now we want to look at what we learned from the Apostle Paul, and very specifically, we want to look at the things he's teaching us in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 12, and Titus 1, 6 through 9. If you're not familiar with those passages, this is where Paul's giving instructions on what leaders in the church should look like. And so we want to explore how do we help a man grow into leadership. Now, I think it's important that we note that these scriptures should not be used as a way to disqualify a man from leadership, but instead, this is the template we should be using for building future leaders. So there are four key areas that we'll look at, four new building blocks that we're going to add that come directly from these scriptures. And they're all dealing with major character issues that the Apostle Paul is pointing us to for men. The first is marriage and children. This important key two relationships that God has given us really help define who we are as men in the way we live those out. And so we have a building block for marriage and raising children. Next is money and work. There is so much in Scripture that is about money. Sometimes it's overwhelming to realize that 10 of the parables were all about money. There are multiple verses throughout the Gospels where Jesus is talking about our finances. And so it's important, if we're going to help a man grow to be closer to who God calls us to be, we've got to unpack how we make our money and how we use our money. And so we'll add that building block as well. Now, this next building block may be the most critical in our society today. This is a building block that deals with sex and moral purity. You may remember from the first video, there were some statistics that went up that said inside the church that 5 out of every 10 men have a serious struggle with pornography. The most recent studies on that say it's probably more like 7 out of 10 men. And so failures in moral purity is one of the key places where the devil can take a man out of leadership. And so helping a man be prepared to be successful when it comes to biblical moral purity, we've got to have that as a building block in our building blocks of disciple making. Now, the last one we talk about is going through hard times. And the reason we look at that is because we believe Scripture points us to hard times being the way God develops character in a man. James 1, 2 through 4 is a great verse that points us to this. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. These trials are things that we should welcome because we know God is teaching us something. And it goes on to tell us that perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Here's the big goal we're after in our own lives and in the lives of men that we're impacting. We want them to be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So, guys, it's important. Men come to spiritual maturity and suffering when they learn to go to God and do what's right. Another of our key verses from Every Man a Warrior is from 1 Peter 4:19 that says, "So then those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful Creator and continue to do good." It's a simple message that we have to learn to do what's right, and God develops that in us through hard times. So now we're going to finish out our building blocks. If we started with our love relationship with God, we're going to end by circling back to kind of where we started when we talked about the Great Commission. The way God plans for us to make our life count is by answering that call to go and make disciples. And 2 Timothy 2:2, we believe, gives possibly the greatest picture for what that should look like when Paul says to Timothy, "Timothy, take what I've given you and share it with faithful men who will be able to teach others." And we see 4 generations there that when we train a man, part of what we're teaching him to do is for him to be able to train another man and to know that he's trained that man to teach another. This is the spiritual generational growth that is what's truly going to make our lives count as men. So we'll add that as our final building block to making our life count. This is important to note, guys. Men won't reproduce something that's not relevant to them. I hope that you see, even coming straight out of Scripture, these lessons from Paul and from Jesus, these are very relevant areas in a man's life that we're going to help him address. The other thing is that men won't reproduce something they're not committed to. Every Man a Warrior, yes, is a Bible study, but it's something different than the typical resource that you've probably used. There is a higher level of commitment. It's a simple and easy resource to use, but it calls men to a higher level of commitment in the number of things they're going to do to learn. Guys, the key to a successful multiplying men's ministry is to help men win the battles they fight every day. We've got to help men succeed in life. Now, I hope this template shows you that we've really thought through this from a biblical basis on how we should grow men. We're going to address the great commandment in these first 3 building blocks. We're going to look at spiritual leadership in the 4 blocks we took from Paul, and we're going to finish it up by addressing Jesus' last command to answer the Great Commission. Now, how does Every Man a Warrior help guys do this? Well, there's 3 books in our series. The first book very specifically helps men to build basic skills on how to walk with God. We're going to address things like quiet time and scripture memorization and meditation and build those basic skills. Then in book 2, we're going to take these 2 primary relationships, marriage and raising children, and put those skills to work. And then finally in book 3, we're going to take these other areas that Paul pointed us to. We're going to deal with money, sex, work, hard times, and how to make your life count. But we'll do all of that through the lens of that personal relationship with God that we've learned about in book 1. So guys, I hope this is helpful. I hope this has brought enough of a challenge to you that you would want to take the next step in this process. You'll get another email shortly that will invite you to schedule some time with me so that we can talk through this more extensively and decide if you want to take even the 3rd step, which would be to start your own Every Man a Warrior group.